So let's raise our kundalini, take a bandha. Let's just close our eyes and take our attention to Sahasrara. Let's take mantra to Sri Ganesha.
Om Shamedeva Sakshat Shri Ganesha Sakshat
Shri Adishakti Mataji Shri Nirmala Devi Namo Namah. Let's take the three great mantras. Om Vameva Sakshat Shri Mahalakshmi Maha Saraswati Mahakali Trigunaatmika Kundalini Sakya Shri Adishakti Mataji Shri Nirmala Devi Namo Namaha. Om Tvameva Sakshat Shri Kalki Sakshat Shri Adishakti Mataji Shri Nirmala Devi Namo Namah. Om Tvameva Sakshat Shri Kalki Sakshat Shri Sahasrara Swami Moksha Pradayani Mataji Shri Nirmala Devi Namo Namah. Pray to Shrimataji to please give us sweet speech and to treat each other with kindness and respect on this call. And please reside in our hearts, reside in our brains, and reside in our attention. Jai Shrimati.
Vishwanaji.
Welcome everybody to the New South Wales Q&A, the very first one, I believe, online. So thanks for joining us, and we have a few questions that have been sent in from Yogis to answer with regard to the Earlwood property purchase, and we also got questions about the school and general questions, so we'll probably just take things in that order. So firstly, just from the council side, or from my point of view as national coordinator, the project for Earlwood has my full support and feels good vibrationally. I know Colin feels the same way, Victoria, and hopefully, if there's a collective desire for it, it can go forward and potentially become a great place for collective worship and collective meditation and potentially public programs and all sorts of good things. So, but that side of things is, as far as the practical elements, is very much in Chris's court. So I'll let him start by taking those questions, and then Chris can just bring me in as he feels the need. So I'll hand it to you, Chris, there.
Thanks, Brett. And the reason why I sort of in my course so much is being a financial transaction and the purchase of a property. It'll be a life eternal trust. That will be the sort of the person, the company or the entity that oversights the transaction. So, of course, we'll consult with the collective, but a lot of the mechanisms around if we do proceed down the purchase will be managed as a property purchase, and that will be done through the trust. And if it does happen, the property will be owned as part of the property portfolio of Life Eternal Trust and Life Eternal Properties Australia. So the first question is came from Jeff and Carol, and there was main concern around the significant initial cost of $1.75 million. And we do acknowledge that it is a significant cost. It's a lot of money that we need to find. It's money we don't have. So the initial approach of the collective would be to raise the 10% deposit, which would be the $175,000, and then to enter into a mortgage with a bank to borrow the rest, and then obviously servicing the loan. And as trustees, we would assess the situation from a financial perspective. Can the collective revenue service the mortgage? So the first question is, can we do it? And the second question would be, should we do it? And the second question is probably the more important one, and that's a decision that we feel that the collective should make. So if we're going to commit to this, it needs to be an expression of the will of the New South Wales collective. And the purpose of this call is to gauge the support for the project, and I think also we'll gauge the support from the pledges that come in for the deposit. So yes, it's a significant cost. I will say it's probably an average cost of a suburban house in Sydney. So it's not out of the ordinary in relation to the amount of money that's being asked for. It's 800 square metres, so it's a significant block of land, and the hall that's on the property takes up about 600 square metres. So it's a large hall that would service the needs of the collective. The cost is significant, but it's within the price range in Sydney. The second question that came from Jeff and Carol was, what would be the final costs, including renovation costs, legals and other costs? A very good question. Stamp duty would be $81,000. Legal and conveyancing costs about $5,000. And we've had Adam, who's our sort of resident Sahaja builder. He's done a building inspection and pest report for the trust on the condition of the building, and what would it take to renovate the building suitable for the use of the Sydney collective. And his estimate is about $80,000 for the renovations. So that brings the additional cost to $166,000, and the projected total final cost would be $1,916,000. So again, a significant outlay of funds for the establishment of a permanent centre. The third question that's come in from Jeff and Carol is, what are the probable impacts to our neighbours, and would it be the same as Burwood? And the simple answer to that is yes. It would be the same impact to the neighbours in Earlwood as would currently be in place at number 10 Clarence Street. The aim for the Earlwood Centre, if we do proceed with it, is that we tend to move all of our meetings to the centre. So there are a number of meetings that would currently happen at number 10 Clarence Street, such as Young Yuva meetings, Yuva Shakti meetings, Bala Shakti meetings, mothers meetings, clearing sessions. So there's pretty much a meeting every day at Burwood currently, and the aim would be that we would locate all of our meetings at the Earlwood Centre. The impact to the neighbours would be mainly noise and obviously parking. Now, the question there is, the reason why the property is attractive to us is it has an existing place as a place of religious worship. That means that it's our youth being, to use a better word, congregational meetings of our practitioners, the yogis, singing, mantras, and children on the site are normal uses that the church would have used the property for before. So it's allowed to be used. The second question that Jeff put, which is related, it may be allowed, but is it the right thing to do? Is it legally or ethically right to do it, to impose that use onto the neighbours? And again, it's a good question. And my response to that is that church has been operating in that Earlwood street for probably about 50 years. So every Sunday for 50 years, people have gathered there. There's been religious services held there. There's no car parking available on the property. So the people that go to the church have parked in the street. And they've sung and they've had all the normal things that happen in a religious service. So the people that have bought into the street and the neighbours have bought into it knowing that there's a church operating in the street. It's very similar to the churches at the other end of Clarence Street. That's also operating in that area for the similar amount of time. And the people that move to Clarence Street move to the street knowing that there's an operating church there. So our use would be just a continuation of what's happened in that community, for a large amount of time. Is it ethically right to do so? My view is yes, because Sahaja Yoga is a community-based organisation. We contribute to the community in all manner of ways, both in the public programs that we run and the tours that we do and all the manner of activities that Sahaja Yoga does to contribute to the community. And for yogis to meet as a collective is just part of us being embedded in the community. So, some of the things that we would do perhaps to mitigate our impact is we might move our programs to an earlier start time, so that would end earlier, and so that there's less impact on the street. So, in my view, and I think in many people's views, the fact that a church has worked there for up to 50 years with people meeting there, it's a continuation of that tradition, and we'll be doing similar things in relation to singing and praying that building has been used for. The next question is the total cost of the proposal, including loan repayments and its stated purpose, the best use of these funds? Another great question. Now, as trustees, our role is to look at the legal requirements, look at the financial requirements to make sure that we don't put the collective in an untenable financial position. So, based on how the money's raised and the negotiations with the bank, our responsibility to the collective is not to promote or proceed with a decision that would put the collective in a difficult position. So our position would be, can we do this? And if the answer is yes, we would go to the collective and say, should we do this? It's not our decision about whether we proceed. Our decision is to put an option on the table. Now, we're currently negotiating with Burwood Council about Burwood. Just to brief everyone, there's still negotiations about returning to Burwood, but in our views, if we do return to Burwood, it won't be in the way we used to use Burwood, which was in an unlimited way with hundreds of people being able to visit the property. The physical limitations of the property, particularly around fire and safety, would mean if ever we did get back, it would be in some limited capacity. So our ability to have unlimited meetings in Sydney probably isn't going to happen at Burwood. So we're left with two options. We can spend the money every week, which is $300 to $400 a week, renting a hall. And that's an option if people are happy to do that. Or we could say, well, if we're going to rent a hall, we could make a bigger effort financially and purchase a hall. And again, the option about renting and purchasing, when the final decision comes to whether we proceed or not, we will seek the views of the collective about doing that. So just to be clear, it will be a collective decision. It won't be something that the trustees or the council decide on, in isolation and commit the collective to. If the collective want this, if they see this as a vision for the future, then we can help make this happen. If people don't want to do this and they're happy to continue to rent, that's a viable option as well. Next question is, does Earlwood accommodate future growth and logistics? The clear answer to that is no. And the reason for that is the religious use was granted at a time when the local building and compliance rules were much lighter than they are now. So that means that it was allowed to be a place of religious worship without providing, say, car parking. If you were to go back to the council and put a DA in to change the building, to put a second story on, add new facilities, that means that the religious worship aspect would be applied in the current BCA rules, and that would mean that we have to provide car parking. So our aim, if we did proceed, is we'd always work within the current limitations, current boundaries of the current building. We can renovate inside as much as we want, but we couldn't expand it at a second story or do anything significantly more than what's currently there. But the size of the building, being about 600 square metres, is bigger. It's about I'd say bigger than the Fitzroy Hall. So it's bigger than the hall we're currently renting. I think it's more than sufficient for what we need to do with the Sydney Collective. And if we grow, well, that's a great problem to have in the future. Next question from Jeff and Carol is, given the COVID-19 restricted environment, should we continue, which may continue for a number of years, and are larger scale indoor collective meetings the way to go? We've gone online, that seems to work really well. So, why are we considering, going back to big collective meetings? Again, a very good observation. This year, the online presence of the collective has been a real godsend for all of us, because it's allowed us to continue in some aspect to express our collective activity and to meet and to worship and to pray and meditate together. But it's an interim measure while the COVID restrictions are in place. Whenever it happens that we're allowed to meet, and as we've seen this year at Balmoral and in Wamaran and Kitchigana, as soon as the government relaxes those restrictions, there's always been a great desire from the collective to get together in person and to offer Shamaji their worship. It's just that aspect of our collectivity that many of us feel is fundamental to the expression of our collective aspect and love of Shamaji. So,
Chris, can I add something to that?
Please do.
I guess to this question, obviously the goal would be to hold the property indefinitely, into the future. But also, I'm imagining this kind of property doesn't become available all too frequently, where it has the affordability in relative terms for Sydney, and it also has the community use already in place. And there's a building there we can use with a bit of renovation. So I imagine this kind of property isn't going to pop up, too often. Is that fair?
Yeah, very fair. And to that point, Jeff, Brett, we've been looking in Adelaide for a suitable property, I'd say between 4 and 6 years. And the challenge we've always got with these sort of churches or these sort of properties is because of their size of land, whenever they come in the market, developers want them to knock them down and put up flats. So every opportunity in Adelaide, we've bid on 5 or 6 properties in that period, and every time we've lost out to developers because of we can't compete on price. This property's got the advantage. It's has very difficult access to the street for cars. It's about 2 or 3 meters above the street level, so it's very difficult for a developer to put underground car park in it, and it's probably too small to given the excavations that were needed. So developers can't develop it. So the only people interested in purchasing it are other religious groups such as ourselves. It can't be a residence. It's not designed as a residence. So your point, Brett, the right sort of property with the right size, and one that we're not bidding against developers, so the price is reasonable or approachable to us. It doesn't come on the market that often. And this is why when it came on the market, we at least put it to the collective to say it's an option. We can let it go and we can see what happens in the future, but it is the right sort of property at the right sort of price. And
yeah, you've also got interest rates at historic lows as well.
Yeah. All right. I think the next question is related. It's talking about going online in the last 12 months and has created new opportunities for collective growth, which we've addressed. I might get Brett to answer that one about online versus collective and the future of collective meetings.
Can you read that, Chris? Because my screen's going to be wacky on my side.
All right. As a comment on the above point, it is evident that changes to Sahaja Yoga worldwide over the last 12 months have created and opened up new opportunities for collective growth.
Is that to say, why should we purchase a property we're meditating online?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I guess we can have both. I mean, I don't personally. I enjoy the online meditation, but given the choice, I think Sahaja Yogis coming together in person is always more powerful. Um, and I guess as Mother has obviously brought these properties or encouraged us to acquire these properties for a reason, and I feel when you come together on these properties vibrationally, it's a much deeper experience and much more joyful. And I know myself personally, I look forward to going to Wamaran every weekend here in Queensland because you walk away much clearer. You enjoy the company of others, and you go deeper together, and you know, you develop great relationships and bonds, and you just can't beat that experience as far as I'm concerned. And when the good old days of being able to get together at the Burwood property, they were pretty magical in my Yuva Shakti days, because you know, you weren't married and you didn't have your family around, and you had all the aunties and uncles who are supporting you. So you develop those bonds, those friendships and those family bonds. So I guess that's my answer to that question. But to say not to denigrate the online programs in any way, shape or form, they're obviously massively helpful and they have a place now in our collective life. But yeah, I don't think you can beat that in-person experience.
For those who've come on the call, we have set questions. If people want to ask questions during this conference call, if you put them on the chat function, and then at the end of the formal questions, we can go through any additional questions that have come in while this call started. The last question from Jeff and Carol has been, lastly, what alternatives might there be to invest approximately $2 million to further develop Sahaja Yoga opportunities in a continuing evolving environment? It's a good opportunity to talk about exactly what are the opportunities and what are the projects that are currently in flight, and what are our priorities, at least from the perspective of the trust and Sahaja leadership. So there are a number of projects that we're looking into. The number one priority, if we're to say, you know, where's most of our attention is going to, it's the purchase of a property in Adelaide. So we are supporting Adelaide Collective in that venture. We've collected money, and we're looking at when properties come on the market. You know, we review them. We go through our lawyers, and we're trying everything we can to look for Adelaide. And we're now looking at potentially buying some land and building a hall. And also, what's happened recently is a council in Adelaide is putting a number of community centres on the market for an expression of interest. So we're looking at potentially buying a community centre. That remains our number one priority.
And Chris, if anyone's not aware of Mother's request for an ashram in Adelaide, you should probably mention that.
Yeah, so as part of some of the appeals for Adelaide, we've shared some videos where Shri Mataji specifically said to the Adelaide Collective, I want you to purchase an ashram. And she'd reinforced that in visits in Melbourne when she's spoken about Adelaide. And she basically said that the purchase of an ashram in Adelaide is fundamental for the establishment of Sahaja Yoga in Adelaide. So we've been looking for maybe 6 years to do this. Slowly we've collected money, and you know, it remains our number one priority. And you know, it is in this case not a case of if it's when it'll happen. The second major priority, it would be the Sahaja Primary School. So what's happening there is the second thing that's happening is we're starting the registration process for a Sahaja Yoga Primary School. There's a pre-registration that happens in March of this year, and that's potentially to have a license to open a registered school in 2022. So that's the second priority, which is the registration of the school. And the third priority would be the planning permission submission we need for Balmoral that would allow us to build a school at Balmoral that once we get the license, we can operate, we have a building to operate the school. So they're the three things that I'd say are a priority, and the Earlwood property would be the fourth priority, and it's definitely seen as a New South Wales project rather than a national project, given that the New South Wales Collective has 3 properties already that it owns. This is something that would address a need in the Sydney Collective for hosting meetings. So, of the $2 million that's spoken about, yes, it's a large sum of money, and there are a number of projects that are in flight. So yes, we are taking a lot on for our future, but at this stage, we think we can, at least the first 3 projects we can get up, and if there is support for the Earlwood property, that'll be expressed through the pledges and the commitment from the Sydney Collective to establish a permanent meeting place. And if you want to add anything else to that, Brett.
Yeah, I feel like the property you've put forward, one of the things I like about it is it's quite publicly stating, we're Sahaja Yoga and here we are. Whereas Burwood's still a bit of a house, and Balmoral's off in the country, and the childcare centre's, it's got its function. But in that talk when Mother spoke about the primary schools in Australia, she's saying, it's really great to see the Sahaja Yogis have created, this is the old school before, but the one we're trying to build now, back in the day, that there's that talk of Shamaji where she says, it's really great to see the Australians are just doing it as a straight Sahaja Yoga school. They're just out, they're not trying to hide anything, and she was very pleased about that. So to me, this is, it's a stepping stone in society for Sahaja Yoga as well. It's saying, here's our place of worship, here's our temple, here's our collective meditation centre, and it's going to be very public and out there for people to see. And I feel like that's a subtle shift as well for us as a collective.
I don't know if I haven't put you on the spot. Any of the New South Wales councillors wanted to maybe make a comment about having a permanent centre in Sydney, or sorry to put you on the spot, but if you did want to say anything about the centre and what it could do for the collective, please jump in at any time. We'll continue on with the questions. So the next question has come in is saying, why are we buying a church when Shamaji suggested we meet in the country? We have a country property. We need to have more programs there. It's a great statement and a great question. So on the question about Shamaji asking for the country property, I was actually in Burwood in 1997 when Shamaji asked us to go to the country, and I was in that time working with Uncle Michael, and she basically looked over us and said, go to the country, buy property, and she said 1 hour from Burwood. So that was why Balmoral was established. But Balmoral has really been established as our, majorly as our puja meeting place. There can be a greater use of Balmoral for weekly meetings, and I think it's been a good suggestion from a number of people saying we should use Balmoral more. So I think one of the outcomes of today would be, from the New South Wales Council's perspective, is they'll probably put a survey out and ask the collective, what's their aspirations in, having some sort of weekly program at Balmoral, be it once a month or twice a month or something with that frequency, and would do it in a way that would make it easier for people to get to. One of the comments I have heard about Balmoral, particularly from older people, is that it's hard to get back from Balmoral when the programs end late in the evening. So we'll be mindful of making sure it's accessible and we're not exclusive. Perhaps if we have a driver for the van, Shamaji's van, the white one, we could do a van trip down there to take some people. So there are options definitely to use Balmoral, but I don't think it's a case of either or. It's together, Balmoral and meeting in Sydney as well. Next question is, how can the collective donate to the school, to Balmoral, and now this Earlwood property? Again, it's something we just spoke about. Yes, there are a number of projects that are in flight. There's also Adelaide, there's a school. I think when the mention of Balmoral is here, it's about building a school at Balmoral and the Earlwood property. So yes, there are a number of projects, and maybe it's too much for us to do all those things at the one time. Again, we're driven by the aspirations of the collective here. There's been great support for the school. Out of all the projects we've started up in the recent years, I think the school project has been the one that's generated the most amount of enthusiasm and support from the collective. So it's clear that getting a school up and running is a priority for the collective, and we'll put that above perhaps the Earlwood one. But I think that this whole exercise, both with the pledges, the emails, and today's call, is just to put it on the table, answer the questions, and say, yes, we can consider it, but if it's all too much, the trust isn't going to make a decision that's anyway going to put at risk the collective financially or in any other way.
Well, that ties back to what you said earlier, Chris, which is this is more of a New South Wales focused project, whereas the other two are more of a national focus.
Yes.
And this is really just an opportunity that's a reason for the New South Wales collective, and it's really their desire that will just determine whether this particular one goes forward. And on the question of how do we afford, then all I'd say there is my experience has been to with Sahaja Yogis in Australia is they're extremely generous when the time comes, when the hour of need comes around. I've seen many, many times where Sahaja Yogis in Australia have been incredibly generous. And sometimes it's really just a leap of faith to follow the vibrations and move forward with a project and have that little bit of a venturesome spirit to see where it leads us.
Just to add to what Brett said, I can remember when a number of years ago we were asked to go to Wamaran to look at the old puja hall that was not in a good state, and we all went up and had a look, and we all agreed it was in a bad state and basically needed to be rebuilt or a new hall put up. And I can remember Debbie, who was the leader at the time, said, but we're in a small collective with 70 or 80 people. How are we going to do this? Get the money and the project up and get this achieved. And we said to Debbie at the time, well, we're a national collective, and I'm sure everyone will get behind you and just make it happen. And that's what happened. People got behind it, and Wamaran's got a beautiful residence, beautiful ashram, and a beautiful puja hall for in numbers, maybe not a great size, but in desire, very large. So pure desire and collectivity works miracles. So the next question was, and there are a number of questions about the idea around the collective village, collective property aspect at Balmoral, talking about leases, talking about yogis owning their own residence, talking about yogis buying collective land. So there are a number of questions that have come about that. So let me just be very clear. A few people have also rung me about this whole thing about, will yogis have land, buy land? Will they go off and, build by the dam, go build by the gorge? The whole property, Balmoral will be populated with little, yogis residences. That's not what we're proposing. What we're proposing is a collective co-housing village. What that means is a section of land, and a section of land that's probably the safest to build in relation to the bushfire risk. And we're getting advice from the RFS about that. So a section of land will be leased from Life Eternal Properties to a new village co-housing cooperative. And the cooperative won't own the land. The collective will always own the land, but they'll lease a portion of the land, a designated portion of the land. So we don't want houses popping up all over Balmoral. We want a village where 10 to 20 small 1 to 2 bedroom townhouse type buildings will be built in a cluster. So it has a village aspect. There are directions that Shimaj has given about the configuration of how this is done. So Shimadaji's direction is basically that it's somewhere where people can live. They have their privacy, their own bedroom, bathroom, small kitchenette. But the whole aspect of the village is that most of the collective activities, the evening meals, the morning meditations, and a lot of the collective activity happens together in the main facilities. So in the main puja hall and the main dining room. And the idea is not to allow yogis to buy houses and set up, their own little, residences, is to create a Sahaj village where people can live semi-collectively, but have some privacy, have their own little home. They will buy a right, so a housing right from the cooperative. The cooperative will have rules about behaviour and being a yogi, basically. And the cooperative can, in circumstances where the person, say, wanted to leave Sahaja Yoga or wasn't behaving properly, the housing cooperatives can force a person to sell their entitlement back to the cooperative for around the same price that they paid for it. So it's not property development, it's not capital gain. It's all about the cost is really just to fund the building. And there'll be a monthly, like a strata fee to cover the services. So the aim is cooperative living. And this has been driven from, I think, a desire from many people in the collective who have said to many of us that, well, I'm living in a little flat, isolated in the suburbs of Sydney. I come to build once a week, and that's it. I have nothing else to engage me, to engage with the collective. Are there options where we can come together and have a community where we live together? And this is the aim. So it's not about development. It's not about creating your own residence. It's about people's desire. It's a bit like living in an ashram, but rather than living in a big house, you've got your own little house where you can have some privacy. But the aim is, if you're coming into this situation, is collectivity. and part of it will be, there'll be aspects about growing your own food, animal husbandry, and both projects are very compatible with the school, because if we don't have a school, it'll be a boarding school, and the staff for the boarding school, being the teachers and dorm staff, will need to live, on site. So if we did this, we'll probably have a few of the houses set aside for, Sahaja use, being teachers and staff. So this again, it will be a project. If it gets up, it'll go up because there's a number of families that want to live collectively and will want to take part in the work to get the housing cooperative up and to do all the work. When we do the planning permission rezoning for Balmoral, seeing as we're doing this big initiative for the school, it made sense for us to put the community co-housing project on the table with the council. We had a meeting with the council in mid-December when we went down and said, look, we're interested in the school in this area. We're also interested in this co-housing village. And before we get too far down the path and spend a lot of money, how would you be placed about the merits of an application like this? And interestingly, they were quite open to it. They said, look, in this Barrel, Mittagong area, there's lots of boarding schools. So it's something that we're used to. So a boarding school is something that, we're used to seeing. They said, and there are some religious communities in this area, mainly Christian ones, monasteries and other things within the area. So it's, religious communities are also something that we see in the area. So they basically said, we'll assess the application on its merits. So as long as we do the right things in relation to, fire hazards, water hazards, ecology, it's an opportunity to get up. We have 45 acres of land at Balmoral. We have a lot of land. We're using about 10 in that top area. So it's a way of, allowing people to live collectively, utilising our land and enjoying the nature that's down there. So some people have said, they'd probably buy one, they go stay on weekends, maybe come to the city for during the week with their families, but it's definitely something. It's been done in Austria. There's one starting in England, and I think there's one also being proposed in South America. So other collectives in the world are also looking. There's one also in the Himalayas. So it's something that where yogis want to come and live together in a way that a little bit of independence is something that's very much in people's attention. And again, this will get up if enough people want it to happen. There has been the last question was about what happened to the Balmoral accommodation building, the other project that we got up. Nothing's been said about that project. And probably the answer to that is, the views of the council and the trustees was there wasn't a lot of collective support for that project. There was some. I had a few people come up and ask about it, but there wasn't an overall demand that we build accommodation at Balmoral. So again, everything that we do as a trust and as a council is reflective of the desires of the collective. If the collective, wanted accommodation, we got a DA up and we're prepared to do it, but there just didn't seem to be, a big, consensus of will from the collective that if we built significant accommodation at Balmoral, that'd be a project that everyone would value and see as, instrumental to our future, unlike the school. As soon as the idea of a school came at Balmoral, we had overwhelming support, from across the country for a project. So I think anything we do on our land, it has to have that consensus that, it's something that all the collective want and that we're doing it for our future, and it has goodwill and support of the major collective. So unfortunately, the accommodation project at Balmoral just didn't have that consensus of goodwill. And our views of the trust and the council was that if it doesn't, we shouldn't proceed. Questions coming about further using, if we aren't going to proceed with the Earlwood property, can we have additional meetings at Balmoral every month? And it's something that we spoke about. I think it's a great idea. And the council have also discussed this in their meetings. And I think a survey will come out about how often we should meet at Balmoral, to better utilise the property, particularly, this beautiful time of the year when the weather's so nice and it's a pleasure to be down there. Okay, so some further questions. How do we find the Earlwood property for sale? I think we just keep an eye. We do keep an eye out in the commercial, because I think we got into a habit because we're looking so much for a property for Adelaide. So we are actively looking, for community centres and churches and, places of public worship in Adelaide, it wasn't very hard to change the search engine from South Australia to New South Wales. And then we did that one day and this popped up. So it was interesting. It wasn't like we were actively looking, but, because we were looking for Adelaide, we just did a quick search on New South Wales and this one popped up and we thought, given our experience in looking for Adelaide, we knew this one was, it ticked all the boxes. So sometimes we thought, well, if it's the right property, maybe Shumalaji's putting it before us to consider it and to present it to the collective to see what everyone thinks. So that's why we've basically seen it and we put it into the collective. Yes, it was advertised. So it was advertised through the commercial real estate network, not the residential. So if you did a normal residential search, you wouldn't see it. But if you search commercially, which we did for the Adelaide one, you'll see it advertised through Ray White. Who's selling it? So basically, a lot of religious organisations are set up very similar to the way we are in Sahaja Yoga. So most religious organisations have a trust that operates the religious aspect, but most of them have a property holding company which owns the property. So in this case, the Church of Christ is a trust, and they have a property holding company that owns the title for the Earlwood property. So if we purchased it, we would be purchasing it from the trust, from the property holding company associated with the Church of Christ trust. A few people have asked, well, they're a evangelical church, their vibrations aren't very good. We're buying a property that, that has a heavy vibrational load. That was the reason why we insisted on an inspection, and we took about 5 people, which is the COVID limit, out there one weekend, and we went through the property and basically checked the vibration, see what we felt. When 5 yogis go into a property, if it's catching on the Mordara or the void, or if it feels, that the vibrations are impossible, then we would have walked away. But it wasn't so heavy. There was the building is split into 2. The back of the larger part of the building is set up as a community hall for general use, and the front of the hall was the congregational part. The front of the hall, which is used for the congregational part, was catching a bit on the Aggia, but overall, the property wasn't so heavy, and such that if we started a renovation and we did the work that we're thinking about doing there, if we were to purchase it, we're pretty confident. The other key thing is it hasn't been used by the church for about a year, so it's been empty. So the biggest observation was a bit musty and needed a bit of clean out and renovation, but vibration wasn't so bad. Let's read another question. So it's asked about the neighbours or any restrictions. So the first question is from Yesu. He's asked, is there any issues around the neighbours or any other restrictions? The key thing is it has an existing place of worship permitted use on the property. So we can use it as any church would use the property, which means to meet, to sing, to chant, to park our cars in the street. So all the problems that we had at Burwood, this is the key thing, we won't have here. So a neighbour can't complain, they're beating a drum, or there's smoke from the haban, or there's cars parked in the street. Because in Burwood, we're residents. We're not allowed to do those things. Here, it's a place of worship. We are allowed to do those things. So the real value of this property is that it has an existing place of worship, and we don't. Someone said, why don't we buy some land and build our own hall somewhere west in Windsor or Richmond or somewhere? That's an option, but look at the setup of Fitzroy Hall. The hall is about 1/3 of the land, and the car park is about 2/3 of the land. So to build a new community centre, you need to buy 3 times the amount of land to fit the hall on to accommodate your cars, and that would push the price up significantly for us. So this is why we think this property is, financially, from a practical perspective, is a good option if we want to proceed down the path. The second question is about, has the finance team assessed the economic position of this? So Sahaja has more properties around the country. All these properties have paid loans. Some are still paying the loans. What's the interest? So the really good position that we have is we have 7 properties that Sahaja, the collective, owns. It's held by LIPA. And the debt on those 7 properties is about $100,000 left on number 12 Clarence Street, and the preschool is paying off that loan. So we have a huge asset base and very low debt to that asset base. So we're in a very good financial position. And we're trying to leverage that position, say, to help us with the bank in Adelaide, because banks don't like loaning money for churches or community centres. And the reason they don't like it is when you go to, if we were to default on the loan and you're going to try and sell it, they're very hard to sell because normal residents, people that want to buy their homes, aren't interested. So usually they put a very high, like they only loan you a very small amount of money and you've got to raise the rest of the money. Because we've got a good asset base, they're more interested in allowing us to have a loan. So the perspective of the finances, we're in a good position, but at the same time, the trustees would not agree to enter into a property purchase if we felt we couldn't service a loan or it put anything at risk. So our number one priority is financial risk aversion. So if we were to come to you and say, we think we can make this work, we'd only do so based on our current financial position. The next one says, now the Burwood Temple is not suitable to be used, first COVID, second the neighbours, maybe in 1 to 2 years' time, when COVID will be over and the problem with our neighbours come and go, Burwood Temple can be used again. I think I've answered this question already. In Burwood, we've got a fundamental problem. It's a residential zoning. And the issue the council has, now a complaint's been made, is fire safety and exit. So their concern is, if in the future, if they allowed us to continue to use Burwood, it's not about COVID and it's not about anything else, it's about fire safety. And if you have 100 or 200 people on that property, and you can imagine in Burwood, if there are a large number of people in the backyard and there was to be an emergency exit and they have to run around that little tight alleyway around the bedroom there or down the side passageway, you know, there's a risk there. And that's a risk we're trying to manage. So we are putting a community use DA application in for number 10 Clarence Street, and we are trying to negotiate with Burwood Council about returning, but the numbers of people that they will allow back on that property, we don't think will be the way it was in the past. So I don't think going back to Burwood the way we used to have it is a viable option. The third is, why running two projects at the same time? So this is about the school and this project and Adelaide and Earlwood. Are we taking on too much? It's a great question. I think Brett's addressed it. I've addressed it as well. You know, yes, we are running a number of projects at the one time, but at the same time, as Brett has said, what we've found in the past is the Australian Collective are extremely generous for the right project. If they believe in a project, if they think it's, you know, achieving an outcome that they believe in, Yogis have always got behind it. They've got behind the Wamara Puja Hall in a big way. There's been great support for the Adelaide ashram. There's been already commitments of support for the school. And our view is we put the proposal on the table. If people feel that we want a permanent, as Brett said, a place where we can put a sign at the front saying this is a Sahaja Yoga Meditation Centre, this is who we are, this is what we do, and we're putting our roots down in the community and putting our stake in the ground. If people believe in that vision and want us to do that, then the support will come. And our view is to facilitate this, not to, not put options on the table for us.
Worth noting, Chris, also there are funds set aside for Adelaide already. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. There's about, easily share this, over the last 4 to 5 years, there's been about $200,000 of collective funds from around the country that are in our account that are earmarked for Adelaide. So we will not use that money. It's a good point, Brett. So money set for Adelaide will only be used for Adelaide. We won't say, well, we'll take that money, use it for Earlwood, and then we'll sort out Adelaide in the future. No. Money's been given for Adelaide. Adelaide's the number one priority. That money will be used for Adelaide. So if Earlwood's to happen, it's to happen through new pledges and commitment from the collective. And if it doesn't happen, that's fine as well. Like, we aren't wedded to the idea. If it's the right thing, it'll happen, and humanity will facilitate that. Just reading the last question. Now, if the Earlwood Centre goes ahead, why not ask Adelaide to borrow the deposit if it's already done? No, we won't do that. So just on that point, if money's been given and there's $200,000 been given from Adelaide, as trustees, we are legally obliged, we can only set aside that money to be used for the purposes for which it's donated. So we cannot borrow it or use it. There's money that, and another example, there's money that we've got from our insurance company to fix up the problems with Bamroll after the bushfire. Again, we are legally obliged to restore Bamroll to a fully operational state, and we can't take that money and then use it for Earlwood. We have to use money for what they're given, for the purposes for which they have given, for that reason. And as trustees, we're legally obliged to do that, and we won't do other. Here's an interesting question. So, Cunnan has asked, can we explore the option of de-investing in Mother's Love Daycare to fund the new property for the collective? Since we are no longer having collective meetings at Burwood, a meditation centre is important to us. It's no longer important to hold neighbouring properties, meaning number 12, and the business. So can we use it to fund the Earlwood property? It's a great question. And again, it's probably a question for the collective rather than for the trustees or the council. And that is, yes, we own number 12. It's probably worth probably close to $2 million with a $100,000 debt. And yes, we could potentially de-invest. I think one thing that we should let you know about that is potentially coming is that there is if everyone's been in Clarence Street, the opposite side to number 10, you'll notice there are 8-storey apartments going up. When we were trying to resolve the issue with number 10, we had a meeting with the mayor. So Harry and I went into Burwood Council, we met with the mayor and some of his councillors, and we went through the whole issue. He was the one who told us the issue we have is fire and safety. And now that the complaint's been made, we cannot allow 200 people in the residence in case there was to be an incident. But then he said, by the way, if you look across the road, he said, that's coming for your side of the street. So he said, you may not get 8 stories, but you're probably going to get 3-story rezoning, and it'll be changed from residential into medium density. And once that happens, then we have options around number 12 and number 10, potentially constructing a meeting hall on number 12 and doing something with the property there. So because it's a real option, I'd say we probably would not, my advice or my position would be, it probably wouldn't be a good idea to sell number 12. We could use number 12 as collateral for the loan for Earlwood. That would definitely help us get the finances. And that's an option we can discuss. But I think given the rezoning coming for Clarence Street, and given we own number 10, number 12, the possibility of us potentially building our own hall next to number 10 is a real one, and we should probably keep number 12 for that eventuality. And that's the end of I think, Halkir, is that it for the formal questions?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I think we've got everything. So, yeah, thank you very much, everybody who's answered the question, to Chris and Brett and everyone who's answered, and also to everybody who's raised the questions.
I mean, fantastic questions, everyone. Everyone's asked really, pointed and really engaged questions. So, thank everyone for their engagement and their questions. As Brett has said, we think from the council's perspective, it's the right sort of property in the right sort of location for the right sort of price. So, from the perspective of is it a good purchase for the collective? Our answer is yes. But the bigger question is, as a collective, do we want to do this? That's the bigger question, and that's something that we're seeking your views about. So a lot of people have been ringing us, emailing us. Please continue to do so. We're open to, we aren't forcing this on the collective. It's something that we think, is a good option, but only if you all think it's a good option. And that will be done through your engagement and your support for what we're doing. So please keep the dialogue going, and we'll keep you posted with how the pledges are going and what our thinking is going on.
Eugene and Andre, do you want to add anything? Or?
I think we pretty much cover everything here. Thanks, Uncle Chris, for answering the questions. It was really good. I think, yeah, the amount of projects we put on the table, it's not a bad thing. It's quite good. We have a choice, and the collective support for the project will show the necessity and the desire behind the collective to run these projects and sustain them. And if the majority of collective will support them, then it's no problem to go ahead. It's all in Srimataji's hand to have those projects in the first place. If Srimataji's will is there, all of this project can happen. There's absolutely no problem. And yeah, I think all of this project is amazing and really good.
This is a unique opportunity. So we're on the call. If anyone wants to ask a call via the video, or if they want to do it, because we're all on this call together, and seeing as we aren't meeting in person anymore, the opportunity to get up and have a dialogue with everyone is limited. So if people want to turn their microphones on and ask us anything, we're happy.
Sorry, Chris, there's a question here from Matthew Cooper, who's just asking, what is the time window to say yes or no to Earlwood?
It's a very quick. So when we met with the agent on the property, maybe through 2 weeks ago, he said, "Oh, you've got to move fast." He said, "There's another church group who've offered the money. It's subject to finance. It could come through any day." Yeah, but he told me this is 2 weeks ago. You've probably got about a week to get yourself organised to make an offer. And my experience is agents always say that. It may be true, or it may not be true, but all of us who were attended that day, we all felt if Sahaja wants us to have this property, then the other offer won't happen, and we'll have the time that we need to sort this out. So if the other offer gets up, that means we're not meant to have this property. So my view is let the collective processes, go through the motions, let everyone ask the questions. We seek our pledges, we talk to our banks. Adam went to the property last week to do a building inspection. So he's about to write that report up for us. So we're going through our motions, going through due diligence. And if the other offer gets up and we lose it, then so be it. My view is that if Sahaja wants us to have it, then he'll be there waiting for us to give us time.
Maybe a follow-up email to New South Wales would be good, Chris, around, I guess it may be worth putting on like a 3-week deadline on Yogis for their pledges or something, just to get them moving, I guess.
Yeah. What I will share is the pledges so far is we're nowhere near the $175,000. So where we are as of today is that we haven't gathered the pledges for the donations to make an offer. So if things stay as they currently are, then financially we aren't in a position to proceed. So if we'll probably send an email out to share that with the collective. It's a good suggestion, Brett. We may put a 2 or 3 week time frame, and then after that, if the pledges come in, we'll go back to the agent and say, sorry, we aren't in a position to make an offer.
Yeah.
I want to also acknowledge the New South Wales Council, Eugenia and Hauke in particular, whose idea was to set this forum up and did all the work behind the scenes to make it happen. So I think a great initiative on their part, and I think it's been a really fantastic opportunity for us to engage with the collective and share our views, and for people to ask questions. It's been very productive and positive. So thank you, Eugenia and Hauke.
Yeah, thanks for engaging with us. And I think, we should do this more often, to have open forum with the collective. I think it's a really good way to engage everyone and have an open conversation.
Totally agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, feels like a good place to wind up.
It's rotation strategy, everyone.
Thank
Just
you.
enjoy, and just keep an eye out for the survey for Balmoral. I think we're going to start using it much more than we have been.
Okay. Jai Shri Mataji.
Strategy.
Jai Shri
Thanks,
Mataji. Thank
everyone.
you,
Jai
everyone.
Shri Mataji.
Bye.
Mataji, thank you. Bye.